Welcome back. Now we hear a lot about buyers unable to get mortgages and sitting tight to wait for the property market to bottom out.
But if you're desperately trying to sell your house and no one's biting, what options do you have? How soon should you think about dropping the price and by how much? With us to offer advice are Angela Keegan of MyHome.ie and Karl Deeter of the Average Mortgage Brokerage. You're both very welcome. So Angela, I suppose there is always that temptation to sit tight, given what we've just come through in recent years in the property market.
Yes, I think there is, and I think, you know, first if you look at the average time to sell a house, you're looking at the cities 4 to 6 months, Dublin certainly sub 4, and that would be to go sale agreed. Around the country you're talking, you know, in some parts of the country up to a year. So I think price is probably the most important factor when you're putting your property on the market. And if it's not attracting interest, certainly my view would be, you know, you need to discuss with your agent. The majority of houses are you know, sold through estate agents. Discuss it with your agent, and if you're going to make a change to the price, have a look around the area, see, you know, what represents good value, but, you know, take the haircut early would be my view, rather than taking, you know, a number of small price drops. If there's a, you know, a figure which you know you won't go below, you need to discuss that, you know, with your selling agent. But you're only going to put yourself through an awful lot of heartache, waiting, you know, months upon months. If there's a price which you believe absolutely represents value and, you know, is akin to other prices that you're seeing in the area, have your homework done and you know, take the pain earlier rather than later.
What patterns have you seen over the past few months in My Home? How many price drops are people making, and how soon are they doing it? It's interesting. I know you watch the figures.
We watch, and I suppose it's what I'm giving you is a general overview, and it's not the same for every property. But generally, you see if there is not much interest after a month, you'll see that there'll be a price drop, and then, if at the 3-month stage nothing is happening, you'll see further price reductions. But you do usually see 1 or 2. What was interesting, and I've said it before, you know, at the peak of the market, the asking price, which is what we see, the asking price was where you started from and you moved up. The asking price now appears to be the price that, you know, in the main, and that vendors are aspiring to. So, you know, I suppose it's a useful guide for buyers in that, you know, you need to be flexible, but normally vendors are willing to negotiate.
Karl, do you see it, and do you think some people out there, especially those selling, still have the notion that, you know, if I hang on, the good times will come back, or they still haven't fully grasped the reality of the property market at the moment?
Well, I guess when someone is going to sell a house, you have to remember price is what another person will pay, not what you think it's worth. So they find out the hard way that if you price it too high, that no one comes to see it. And as they start to make these incrementally lower asking prices, that suddenly you might get a phone call, go a bit lower, you get 2 phone calls, go a little lower again, now you're into viewings. And the thing to remember is, really, price is the big thing. If you're not getting the viewings, drop the price, because if you spend €5,000 getting the place looking absolutely smashing, are you going to get it back out? And that's the question you have to ask yourself as a seller, because it's really about what's left over from the proceeds, if indeed it's going to be anything. So the single strongest factor in it is going to be prices, and that's all there is to it. It's in a market that is an adjustment, and you have to move with it, or you'll just be locked out into the land of no viewers. OK, well, let's take an example here. Let's take a case study. I went earlier to a house that's on sale in Griffith Avenue, and when the vendor heard that TV3 were doing a piece on the house, they dropped the price by 50,000 because they knew it was going to be on television. Take a look at this. On the market for the past 8 months, this 4-bed semi-detached home on Griffith Avenue just won't shift. It started off with an asking price of $495,000, but has since been reduced twice. It's an executor sale, and the vendor is now keen to get rid of it.
It was a price drop after Christmas, because the period before Christmas obviously had been very unstable, and we were really seeing a reluctance in buyers to make commitments to purchases throughout the market. So in January, January we had reduced the price to 450,000. There's been a further price reduction only this week, where the property is now available at 395,000, which again is an incredible price for a 1930s home on this road of Griffith Avenue, where you could really expect to pay between 600,000 and 700,000 for a lot of the period properties here. This property would have tremendous road frontage, but unfortunately to the rear the garden is quite small, and that has been a major drawback to people, you know, especially with children and looking for that family home. And maybe as a consequence of that, it does afford people an opportunity to buy a very good family home on a great road, at a great address, for a very, very reasonable price.
So what advice would you give to people out there who are selling their houses at the moment? They aren't shifting, they haven't made a price drop. How long would you say you'd leave your property on before you kind of go, okay, look, we know we need to make a decision here?
Well, I think once you have established that the house has been given a good chance and proper marketing conducted, that you've had a number of people through the property, if you're finding that you're still not having offers, it is time really to sit down and look at what else is available in the area and to adjust the price accordingly. Obviously, a combination of the amount of property available on the market, I suppose, combined with the difficulty in securing finance, are really two greatest elements that are kind of forging house prices at the moment.
Is there a time frame that you talk about? I mean, before you suggest a price drop, I mean, 3 months, 6 months?
I would say it kind of depends where you start from. You know, certainly if you start with a very high expectation, but certainly within 2 months you should have a clear indication. The property should have been, the marketing really should have penetrated at that stage, and you know, you should have had a good footfall and good amount of people through it. If you're finding that you're not actually getting people through, clearly you're overpriced in the markets today.
And is that what you're finding? Do you think there are a lot of sellers out there who still have their heads basically in the clouds over this?
I think it's a very emotional thing, and obviously, yes, you know, it's a huge financial decision.
But are you still seeing this?
You still see, to a degree, certainly, it's very hard for people to readjust from the dizzy heights that we were 4 years ago. At Disney, we would certainly be giving the advice to put the property on the market at a realistic expectation, because otherwise you may well be chasing a falling market.
Karl, that is a great price, isn't it? I'm sure that's going to attract interest now that it's dropped. But what's it going to mean for the buyer in terms of mortgages?
Well, the most popular mortgage is still a 90% mortgage for a first-time buyer, for instance, and the most popular term is 30 years. If you bought that property at the old asking price, you'd be paying over $2,000 a month in mortgage payments with a 90% mortgage. If you did that today, you'd be paying about €1,750. That's €250 a month of a difference of after-tax money, over $3,000 a year, and over $90,000 during the course of that loan. So that's why it makes sense for a buyer to hold out on price. That's why they're doing it.
But isn't that the danger, that more and more buyers are going to hold out, and that's going to sort of tighten the market and stagnate it again?
Credit is tight as well, and so it just reinforces the message. If you want to sell your house, you've got to get the price down and also work on presentation. I mean, you see in that clip there, they had all of the walls a nice neutral colour. You could see that there was new carpets put in. It was presentable. People could see the possibility when they walked into it, and that clip certainly helped as well. So there's various factors.
Only one offer in 8 months, and that offer fell through. So, you know, there's only so much a paint job can do, you know, when there's only one offer. Angela, you have examples of a couple of other houses that have also been dropping their price. The first one has had 7 price drops, and these people seem to have been really Mickey Mousing around with like €1,000 drops here and there.
I think, yeah, this is the one. I think the one you refer to is one John O'Reilly from Sherry Fitz gave it to me in Ballymore Eustace. This went on the market last April at $525, and you're right, 7. I think we're on to the 8th price drop, and this house is an absolute example of how a price drop makes a difference, because when you see it, it's a 4-bedroom bungalow and it's on 2 acres. And I know from talking to the agent that since the last price drop, that house is now in the market for $447,000. Started out at $525,000. Since the very last price drop, they've had 2 offers over $400,000, and they're confident that they'll bring it to a conclusion. The other thing that was interesting when we looked at that one was they've had a total of 42 viewings on that property. The brochure has been viewed over 700 times, almost 800 times. Over half those views happened after the last price drop. People are just discounting. if it's you know, over a certain price. So that's a typical example of a house that could have attracted a lot more interest a lot earlier on in the proceedings, but thankfully is attracting the interest now.
And it could have been shifted by now
Probably
if they
would
made
have
the
moved
move much earlier in the process.
by now, because as I say, the indications on that house are very good at the moment, because yes, it's price correct.
I think we're heading now. The next example you have is down south.
Yes, I'm not sure if it's the Cork or the Waterford one, but if I look
We're
at...
looking at Cork,
one?
yeah.
In Middleton, yes.
Yeah.
Adriana Hegarty has an apartment in Middleton, offers superb value. It's a 2-bed apartment at 130 grand. That apartment was sold originally, I'm fairly positive in saying, for 320, which would have been at the peak of the market around 2007. There's practically no interest in it, and there's absolutely no offers on it. So it's hard to see how it's going to go below 130. And I think the apartment market absolutely is proving really difficult and really challenging for vendors at the minute. And the other point Adriana was making to us is, we talk about the commuter belt being out of favour and about, you know, close to the city being in vogue. If you look at Middleton, in Middleton itself is very much in vogue for houses, but you look out at, you know, like Ladies Bridge, Cloyne, etc., outlying areas, they're not attracting interest. So I think that apartment may have to reduce further, or we're going to have to see, you know, more buoyancy enter the market before you're going to see that move on.
It's an incredible drop, though. When you think
like when you think of what it was sold for originally and now what it's available for, and it's a beautiful apartment.
Karl, you have your hand up there. What is it?
I was just going to say that if you don't take your price drop early, there's something to consider. Every second house in this country doesn't have a mortgage on it. The first property that we saw in the clip there was an executor sale. That means that whoever owned it passed away and it's part of their estate. By not selling it, for instance, the people who will get the money from it don't have that money on deposit or invested elsewhere. If it does sell for 400,000, they could have made 12,000 in the last year that isn't realised. Equally, if you do have a mortgage on a property and you're not taking the price drop, you're carrying that cost all of the time, which eats into what you might get otherwise. So I just can't stress strongly enough the idea that property price drops are not only in the buyer's interest, it's primarily in the seller's interest, because there's another side to what they're doing that will either be unrealised profit or lost income by not dropping the price as much as they should have.
I think we have time for one more. Down to Waterford,
yeah.
Lismore.
Yeah, in Lismore, again, it's a lovely bungalow, 4-bedroom bungalow, 1.2 acres. That is started at 275, and when you see it now, it's at 199. What was really interesting, and it is beginning to attract the interest at 199, what was quite interesting for Waterford, we spoke to Geraldine Reynolds in Waterford, and they had a project on last week where they phoned all their vendors, and without exception all their vendors agreed to price drops, and their phones are hopping off the hook since. And again, it's a further example. Priced correctly, you'll attract the interest, and then that's your starting point.
And Karl, obviously get in there with the fixed rates before they all disappear, is that it?
If they haven't already.
As a matter of fact, when we were doing this same piece in January, I'd said that fixed rates might start to get removed from the market, and at the time it was just, you know, a wild prediction, but it actually has started to happen.
It went very quickly. Yeah.
Permanent TSB have taken them off the market, EBS have taken them off the market, Irish Nationwide removed them, then effectively closed down, and other banks are starting to remove certain fixed rates. So it is an idea, lock in that price so that if you are buying, that you at least have some guarantee, because otherwise lenders are just going to push it all one direction.
Okay, as ever, Angela and Karl, thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you
very much.
Now, at just 10 and 14, they must be two of Ireland's